Hey, Mike here with Canadian Musician right now in the upstairs of the Rivoli in downtown Toronto. With me is Gavin of Toronto-based band The Wood and Sky, who are, I believe, a week from tomorrow, April 7th, if I remember correctly. New album is out called Swimming in Strange Waters. Title track is available on YouTube, and the lead-off single, which is now just escaping my mind. Lead-off single.
It's the same name, Swimming in Strange Waters.
Oh, I saw that the lyric video, or that there was a video there, but I'd seen a separate release for another song.
Oh,
there's two. I know there's two out.
There's actually 4 out now, because the record's and actually we're starting to stream the record in full. I think tomorrow on CBC. So there's Swimming in Strange Waters is out. You're Not Alone was released. I guess that was about a month ago in the UK. But I mean, when you release something on the internet, it's out everywhere. And then Indie 88 played or has been playing Matter of Time.
Matter of Time is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and then the Strombo show premiered Riding on the Wind. Right on. So that's 4 out of 9. So we're almost at halfway.
There you go.
Yeah, we're actually working. We haven't made a lyric video for Matter of Time, but we are working on a karaoke video. And so I'm going to make like a MIDI karaoke version of it to go as a B-side. It'll be fun.
Right on. And this will be 5th full length, 7th record in total if you include your guys' 2 EPs, I believe. And it also, Mark?
How many EPs? There's 2 EPs? City of Light. What's the other one? City of Light and Helen Betty Osborne, maybe? That's 7-inch. I should know this stuff, right? That's my job.
It's your career.
It's funny because I remember reading like Dylan books. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and someone was asking about a song and be like, "What record is that on again?" And I was like, "How do you not know what record your songs are on?" But as you start to release, you know, you like, I mean, if we're talking about 5 records, a lot of our records have like 13 or 15 songs on them. You know, that's like 70 songs almost. So it's like, it's a lot. I forget. So thanks for reminding me. I appreciate it.
There you go. Well, the new album is the follow-up since 2014's Let's Be Ready.
That much I know.
All right,
it's true.
There we go. Now we're back on track. No, but I'd seen an interview you did around the time of Let's Be Ready where you were saying the recording of that album was a bit different in the sense that you guys were really concentrating a lot on the demoing process because you wanted to capture the live band sound.
Yeah, that was interesting. Sorry.
No, I was just interested. With that in mind, how does the recording of the new album kind of compare to that experience?
Well, it was different because this record we recorded ourselves. In my studio. We did some of Let's Be Ready in the studio too. But with that record, I mean, with Let's Be Ready, we learned a lot about what that meant, I think. And I also started to see how songs changed from, like in the previous releases, how they changed from when we wrote them and recorded them to live. And so we almost kind of didn't have to do that step this time in terms of like demoing them. Like for Let's Be Ready, we pretty much made the record through demoing with overdubs and stuff, then toured it, then went back and re-recorded it with like the things that we learned. And with this record, we kind of just already had, you could sort of look back and see the evolution of that. And so we sort of knew what things to look for, I think. But we did a lot of demoing for this record, which was actually really cool because it sort of set us on the path for recording the record. Because we holed up actually at my girlfriend's parents' farm outside of Ottawa in Quebec for like a week or so. Felt very Canadian, you know, in the winter. It was in January. And we took this old tape machine with us that I had, and we did all these demos on it, and they turned out great. And I just loved the sonic quality of it, and also the performance aspect of us playing together, like literally in a room with amps in a room. And so that sort of became the blueprint for making the whole record. We did the record like that.
What was it? I'd seen in some of the press you'd done for this album using the term demoitis, which of course isn't a new term, and many musicians can relate to that.
Yeah, people outside of the music, outside of like being a musician, people that maybe don't know that term, but it's very real.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it? Because you had said you'd recorded it. Was it just like a 4-track tape machine that you were using, or 8-track?
8-track, yeah.
What was it about the? Was it just the tone that you got through? Maybe it was just the carefree attitude that goes with just knowing something's a demo. Like, what was it about those
I think that's what you fall in love with about the demo is that carefree attitude. I always find that with songwriting too, and it's like, oh, I'm just writing this song. I don't care about this song. It's like it's just for fun. Yeah. Whenever you do that, it's like that's your best song. You know, it's like because you don't care, so you let go of some of those inhibitions. I think that was a big part of it for that demoing process. Also, the sonic quality of the tape, like and being limited to 8 tracks, was beneficial. And also, I'm a big believer. well, I do a lot of recording for other bands too and mixing stuff, and a lot of the time there's this like push towards recording everything super confined and isolated. Even if you play together, it's like very like sterile in the sense that like, okay, we'll put the amp in a different room so you don't get any bleed, so you have control after. But then what I find is what you end up doing is like trying to recreate. So you like separate everything, make it sound like they're separate so you can control it. And then you spend all this time later trying to make it sound like they're played together. It's like, well, why don't you fucking play them together? And so it was like, okay, and like, with moderation, it's like we still had some baffles and things in the studio, but like the bleed from the guitar amp onto the drums allowed for there to be like a three-dimensionality to the record, which I love.
Were there any tracks from those original demos that you ended up just using within the mix on the album?
Yeah, one song called Black Gold. So we continued the demoing process back in my studio. And so that song we made a demo of together. And then I ended up, I really wanted to release it like as a single. Around the time of the election in Canada, I was like, I need to do something. I need to do my part. And I wrote the song sort of about the Keystone Pipeline, which has now been passed, but anyway. And the guys were still in Amsterdam. We just finished touring, and so I was like, I'll just finish the demo and then we'll release it, which we didn't end up doing. But we did decide like, hey, this is it. This is the song. So yeah, that song made it through the demo process.
You bring up writing about the Keystone XL pipeline. Had you, when you look back at your back catalog, were you, or did you consider yourself a topical songwriter, or was that kind of a new venture?
Sometimes. But I just feel now more than ever like if I'm going to do something about things that I believe in, this is something that I have to offer. So, I mean, I've written songs like that. They're not protest songs necessarily, but like, yeah. And I think every songwriter is kind of like that in some respects. But I wrote a song about what's called The Lonesome Death of Helen Betty Osborne, about an Indigenous woman who was murdered in the Pas, Manitoba. And that was on our first record, actually. So it's always been something. I mean, it's a sad story and an important story in Canada's history. So it was interesting to write about it too, because I went to try to do research on it, and there was so little out there about it, and so like at least I could contribute to that canon a bit.
Just the name of the song. You mentioned that you were a Niger Delta fan. Was it the term taken from Lonesome Death of Haiti Car?
It was. Yeah. I took the title, adapted the title.
There you go.
Yeah,
like Dylan would have.
Yeah, exactly. Just paying it forward. Yeah.
on the new album, Swimming in Strange Waters, from the songs that are out of it, at least, I got a sense that it's maybe a rockier, almost swampier, in places more psychedelic album. It's a diversion from the sound I would have typically associated with the Wood and Sky. Do you see it that way? And if so, was that kind of a conscious thing at all?
Yes and yes. It's interesting. A friend of mine has a night in Toronto called Casual Drones, which is just like a night where musicians perform these pieces that sort of fit into that category or that under that umbrella, drone music, noise music, experimental. And so he asked me to do it, and I was like, yeah, I would love to. And so I wrote this piece for it, and it sort of opened up for me a new way of writing. And so I started working on just embracing that sort of, like you said, I guess swampier is a good word for it, And it definitely wanted to go more psychedelic because I've been listening to that kind of music. Like I've been into sort of the Paisley Underground movement from the I guess it's 80s in LA. It's sort of.
I'm a big music history fanatic, but I'm not familiar with Paisley Underground.
Well, it's sort of like a resurgence of like the Byrds kind of sound in the 80s. So like the band that I really love, the record I really love, is by this band called Rain Parade, and the album's called Emergency Third Rail Power. God, I think that's what it's called actually. It's like a really long title. It's this cover with all these colorful balloons, and it's such a great record. And so it's sort of that coupled with this Casual Drones piece that I wrote. And I mean, everybody in the band was like sort of moving in that direction, and it just felt sort of natural. We've had this Farfisa in my studio this is the Canadian Musician blog, so I can talk about nerdy stuff. We've had this Farfisa in our studio since I've had a studio. We never really used it before, so we plugged it in, and we're like, oh my God, this sounds incredible. And so it's all over the record, and it really kind of defined the sound of the record in a cool way.
Is it normal for your songwriting to be shaped by a tone or an instrument in that way?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's like when I first started playing the ukulele, it was like I started writing songs differently. And I think it's cool to be able to write songs on an instrument that you don't play because you don't have like rules that you abide by. Yeah, like and I also don't know if I'm playing a C or a D or a G. I don't know. You know, on guitar it's like it's a G, so definitely a C is pretty natural to go to. You know, whereas on the ukulele I'm just like fumbling around making it sound good. To me, what sounds good. You know, so yeah, I think so. And anytime you're just excited by a sound or a tone, it just leads you down a path. Yeah.
Well, I guess first of all, what's the division of labor with regards to songwriting and arrangements in the band? Are you bringing fully formed songs to the guys and then you flesh it out, or, anyways, how does that work?
Yeah, it depends on the song. Yeah, sometimes, like, but we always add to it as a band. And it's funny because I always bring these demos in and think like, this is it. This is how it's got to be. Demoitis right there again. And then we work on it for a long time, and I get kind of my back up a little bit, and then we work through that. And then I listen back to the demos. We're actually releasing a cassette tape of all the demos from this record. Cool. So I've been mixing those and just like doing a little bit of mastering to them. And it's funny going back to them now because I realized like, yeah, we made some good decisions in growing forward, you know. So, excuse me. I mean, every song's different, but we work on things together a lot.
May I ask why cassette tape? I'm all for the retro vinyl thing. I still buy way too many CDs, but I've never understood cassettes.
Demo, because it's a demo tape, so it kind of fits.
All right.
Also, I'm just like obsessed with tape in general right now. So like one of the songs on our record is recorded to cassette tape. Like I have a 4-track cassette recorder. Actually, someone gave one to me. I mastered a record for them, and it took so long. And it's a great record. It was really awesome. And then after we were done, he gave me one of the 4 tracks it was recorded on. And so I started messing around with it, and I just love the sound of it. So Born to Die, which is just like an acoustic, 2 acoustic guitars, 2 voices, is recorded onto that machine, which is like the same machine I had when I was 14, like that I learned to record on, essentially. Not the exact one, but the same model, you know. It was funny recording that song because we were in Montreal at a studio called Hotel de Tango, recording for like 3 or 4 days, and so I brought... Yeah, I love it. We've made a couple records there. It's awesome. And so we went down there just because we've been recording everything at my studio in Toronto. We're like, let's take a break and go to Montreal for a few days, use their piano. And like Howard, who's one of the owners and is a good friend of mine, he just basically like gave me the keys and I engineered the session. Like we had to rent it, of course, but I engineered it. And so it was funny to be in this beautiful studio with all this amazing equipment and just to like set up my little cassette recorder and like hit record. I'm like, okay, great. But I mean, the room sounds great. Anyway, whatever it takes, you know, whatever it takes.
You'd said this is the first time you guys recorded yourselves. I'm guessing just with your resume, you were the one kind of taking the reins as far as engineering and producing. How'd you find it? Because I know speaking with other artists who have been self-produced, some do it amazingly well, obviously, but others find it counterproductive because they can't have their head fully in one job or the other, as whether musician or producer or engineer or whatever. How did you find that?
Pretty easy. I don't know. I mean, like I was saying, I sort of worked out the kinks in the demoing process. And again, we have 8 tracks, so it's like, don't overthink it. It's like we had 5 mics on the drums, bass DI, and 2 guitar mics. So and then it was just listening. We were using our ears more than anything, which was awesome. And I think the real pitfall, someone was asking me about this yesterday, like the real strength, and also it's like a double-edged sword. It's the real pitfall also is like the lack of limitations that come with doing it yourself, also with using, like we did use computers after the tape as well. So you have this like limitless possibility. And also we're not paying for time because it's our studio. So that you know, it's like the Clash album, Give 'Em Enough Rope. It's like, you know, you can hang yourself pretty easy.
It's funny. I remember I had a conversation a few years ago now with Dave Bottrell, the well-known producer and engineer, and he was talking about, and this is kind of an anecdote that I've used a few times on this whole idea of limitations or a lack of limitations comes up, especially in digital recording. But essentially what Dave Bottrell had said to me one time that I never forgot was he was working on trying to remember, I think it was a Peter Gabriel album he was talking about. Because it was one of those situations where the process was just going on, and there was becoming ridiculous numbers of versions of every song and that kind of stuff. And he was talking about how sometimes you need to put almost false constraints on yourself, because when you have unlimited options. As he said, at some point it stops becoming better; it just becomes different.
Yeah, actually, that's something that John Agnello, who mixed our record, kept saying. He's like, well, we can make it, we could change it. It's gonna be different, not gonna be better. Yeah. I think about, I can't remember if it was a movie I watched, and it was a teacher had gone to a parent-teacher interview in the movie, and it was a kindergarten class, and she was looking through the kids' paintings, and we're like, my God, all your students are like Picasso. They're beautiful. And the teacher said, it's not that they're Picasso, it's just that I know when to take their canvas away. It's like, that's true, eh? Because at some point you're like, it's diminished, like a amount of diminishing returns, it's like, it starts to get worse.
Yeah. And lastly here, because you guys are a Toronto-based band, we're here in Toronto, I'm always wondering, I've been thinking about this just because recently I was speaking, do you know Leif Vollebeck, Montreal singer-songwriter? I was speaking with him recently, and we got on the topic of scenes, and in the early 2000s there was all the talk about the Montreal scene and that kind of stuff, and he is saying he would be someone, if you were to talk about a Montreal scene at the moment, Leaf would probably be someone that would be mentioned, but he is saying he doesn't really see it that way. It's a city like every other city, has a lot of bands. Yeah, sure, some of them interact, some of them collaborate and that kind of stuff, but he just doesn't see it as a scene per se. I was wondering how, with just that being on my mind, how you see it in Toronto. Do you consider there to be a quote-unquote scene?
Feels like there's lots of scenes. Toronto, to me, is a lot bigger than Montreal. Yeah. And I don't mean that. I never bought into the whole rivalry thing between the cities. I think that's bullshit. Yeah. I mean, for example, I was in Montreal recording for the record, and we were having lunch down the street from the studio. And Leaf, it's funny you mentioned him. He was recording at Break Glass. We were at Hotel Tango, and we had lunch together at this little convenience store. And anyway, it's nice when things are small. And I don't know if there's a scene I guess it would be hard because it would be kind of depending on how you define a scene. Yeah. That said, I definitely feel like there's a music community in Toronto, that there's a lot of people that are a part of it. Yeah, I mean, what's the difference between a scene and a music community? And that changes and evolves over time. And I realize that you have to really work to be part of any community in terms of you can't be a leech. You have to give something back to it, And because we've been a band now for almost 10 years, you have to work to be part of that, and you have to want to go to shows and meet people and support what other people are doing, and I like that. That's fun. Yeah. It's funny. Susan and I were just talking about Bellwoods, and there was very much a music community around Bellwoods. It was called the Friends in Bellwoods. You
guys are part of the I think you guys started as a result of that compilation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we were around the peripheral of it, and OBG was definitely the focus of it. Well, not. They were just the impetus for it, and they worked really hard to make that community happen, and it was awesome. And I was friends with them, and I was I really want to work hard to be part of this because it's something beautiful, and and that I think you have to continue to put that time and work into it. It's funny to say that. It's you don't consider it work, but it's just it's not, because it's not work in the sense you're not getting paid for it. It doesn't feel laborious. Yeah. It's just something that you have to be conscious of, making a commitment and contribution to. Yeah. And it's great for me because, for us as a band, it helps garner new ideas for us to see what other bands are up to. And as someone who mixes records or masters records, it's also important for me to just, see what people are into.
Yeah. Just picking up on the word work, because for some, I consider for some strange reason, some bands or songwriters are hesitant to refer to what they do as work. But I think if you're going to have a career and be serious about it, it is work at some point, and not all of it's going to be fun. But that said, it doesn't mean, some people take that to mean I'm going to sit down and write and record from 9 to 5 every day and treat it like a day job. And some people are still more the laissez-faire. I'll work when I feel like it, or inspiration strikes sort of thing. What's your mindset around that?
Well, you think I want to be here having a beer in the middle of the afternoon? No, it is work, and I like working, and I'm pretty lucky to be able to work at what I like doing. But I do set out, it's loose time constraints. Yeah. But I think what you were saying about this laissez-faire attitude about I'll work when I feel like it, I don't think it's realistic because you have to make time. Yeah. And I think anybody it's nice to pretend that it's like that. Yeah. Also, it has to feel like that because when you're working on something creative, you can't just sit down and say, I'm going to get it done. Yeah. But if you don't make the time to do it, you don't do it. And so with the band, we try to devote 3 days a week to get together and work either on music or something else, preferably music. But right now we have a record coming out, and we're okay, well, there's other work to be done, and that's fun too. I like designing the cover of the cassette or like making a poster. That's fun stuff for me. I like doing that. Do I love making Instagram posts? No, I don't really love doing that. But it's like I recognize the importance of staying connected and like also communicating what we're up to so that people can have a window into that. I don't like it. Because it takes up a lot more time than you think it does, you know? And I'd get a lot more joy out of playing guitar, but these are the realities of it. And so you just find a balance.
And going back to the new album before I let you go, well, first of all, again, Swimming in Strange Times is out April.
You're very close.
Very, very close. Yeah. Swimming in Strange Waters out April 7th. With that, and before I let you go, as far as touring plans, speaking of work, what do you guys got planned? Where can people see you in the coming months?
Well, April 19th, we're going to be at the Phoenix for the Indie Awards. April 22nd, we're at the Bush Plane Museum in Sault Ste. Marie. And then we're going out on tour with Timber Timbre through the States and through Canada as well. So like dipping back and forth. Yeah. And then we're off to the Great Escape Festival in Brighton, UK. Cool. And then actually I'm producing a record for a Swiss band in Norway for a couple weeks, which is going to be amazing. And they're a great band. It's going to be fun. They're called Josh. And then we're going on tour in the UK. In Europe. Sorry, this is a lot. I'm telling you a lot of things. And then we're playing in Spain at the end of June. And then we have a bunch of festivals around Canada and the US. So we're busy. It's good.
So once again, Swimming in Strange Waters. Out next Friday, April 7th. And Gavin, I've enjoyed this. Thank you a lot,
too.
man.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.